So the next section we're going to do, again, looking at that idea of creating a sense of safety and security for the young person, and again, in a very specific way, considering going back to school and re-engaging with education and learning after quite an extended period of being out of school. And we're going to use what I think is probably one of the most effective strategies I've found ever to use to expand the conversation with young people in class. And now you can use this, I use it one-to-one working with students, I've used it in small groups, I've used it in large classes, I've used it a lot with adult facilitation and doing training with staff groups. And it's a thing called thinking hats, and it's based on work done by Edward de Bono. And if you again do a bit of research around Edward de Bono, he was one of the initial gurus around lateral thinking and getting people to think in different ways. And he has a whole series of programs. The court thinking model, it's a way of teaching young people to expand the way they think and process information. But it's basically around building cognitive capacity and their ability to understand and manage information. And this idea of thinking hats, traditionally, I'm going to maybe use a visual example here to explain it. And we were just saying we might talk about holidays as an example. And myself and Anne and Hannah are going to have a bit of a conversation in general, and then we're going to use this tool to expand that concept out a little bit. So if I was to ask people to think about holidays, as a general rule, Anne might start thinking about where she went, she might think about what she enjoyed about it, Hannah might start to think about, getting there, the hassle of it, and packing bags, and what if something goes wrong, and if things haven't working out well. And generally, if we're working with a group, what tends to happen is if we think about the direction of our thinking, is that we can all start to go all over the place. So I might say to Anne, tell me a little bit about your holiday, and Anne might start giving me one type of information. Well, the temperature, the weather, the hotel she stayed in, whereas Hannah might start talking about all the people that were on the holiday with her planning, her organisation for the holiday. And it's really the idea that working sometimes in that disorganised cognitive way, where everybody is thinking in different directions, can mean that it's harder to structure a conversation. And we miss out on elements of that topic. I would find I use this idea a lot when talking to young people about planning their future, because they get very caught up in one area of it, rather than being a bit more focused in the way they think about it. What Thinking Hats does is it creates parallel thinking. So it gets, in this case, Hannah and Anne to think in the same direction for a period of time. And it allows people to think in one direction, and I'm directing your thinking. And de Bono's Thinking Hats basically has 6 thinking hats. Now, if you think about it like a metaphorical hat, and if I put on the white thinking hat are facts and information, but they are pure facts. So if I said to Anne, I know Anne is just back from a small break, and if I said to Anne, let's do white hat on your holiday, Anne. Anne might tell me where she went, how far that was from her home, how long it took her to get there. She might tell me the name of the hotel she stayed in. But it is only factual data, the facts. And that when I say that we're all going to do a bit of white hat thinking on the holiday, we give all the facts, the places, the names, the direction, the duration, the times, but they must be absolute facts. They can't be, I liked it, that's not a fact. So, and when we go through each of the different hats, and we have some information in the workbook for you on that. So if we, let's say, talk about holidays in general for a moment, and let's say we take, I should have some pens here to use that. So the white hat, now I've seen this done loads of different ways. You can print out images of different coloured hats. You can have those up around the room. You get people to go around maybe and fill in the worksheets on the walls, use post-it notes. There's loads of different ways of getting people to think in this way. But if we were talking about holidays and just a white hat, what kind of facts might we include in that conversation?
Destination.
Yeah. I'm going to try a different pen because this one's not going to read very well. Yeah.
Length of time, how long you spent there.
Yeah.
Transport.
Yeah.
Cost.
Yeah.
Accommodation.
Yeah.
Things to do.
Yeah.
Who you went with, people.
Yeah. Any other facts about the holiday?
The weather, I suppose, the temperature.
Food.
And you keep brainstorming. Now, the next one, and you can decide the order. One of the most important hats is the blue hat. Right now I'm wearing the blue hat. And the blue hat is, I'm directing the thinking. I'm organising the process. I'm structuring what we are doing. Now, in a conversation, you might not use all of the thinking hats. You might say we're going to do some white hat thinking and some red hat thinking. We're going to do some white hat thinking and some black hat thinking. The second hat we're going to look at is black hat. Now, black hat is the hat of judgment. It's the hat of where you're thinking, where you're critiquing, where you're analysing what didn't work. So if you're doing this as an evaluation or reflective tool after an event, so after a piece of work, let's do a bit of black hat on the weaving. And you might think what worked or what didn't work. Let's do a bit of black hat on the tie-dyeing. What worked, what didn't work. So the idea being is you can use it, there's times you might just use one hat. But all I'm getting the group to do is think in one direction. And it's a really good way of focusing the mind. So let's think about it. If you were coming back from a holiday, what kinds of things might somebody have said? Let's do a quick black hat on that trip. What kind of things might they say?
Well, the weather, if the weather was poor
Yeah.
when you were away, that could obviously be a negative.
Yeah.
If you spent too much money or more money than you had
Yeah.
planned to spend.
Yeah.
If you were, depending on transport, if a flight was delayed or, that kind of thing.
Things that were delayed, yeah.
Food.
Yeah. So what you're doing is but the most important thing is you're managing the direction of thinking and how much time you allow people to do that. And now I want us to think about yellow hat. Yellow hat, think about sunshine. Yellow hat is what works well, what gives you warmth and encourages you and motivates you. So let's think about yellow hat and going on holidays. What kinds of things would pop into your mind to talk about?
Well, it's maybe the people you went with, the time spent maybe is,
Time with
yeah.
friends. Fun.
Yeah, the memories that you made.
Memories.
Yeah, experiences you had.
Yeah. Experiences. Loads of new food. New people. What other things?
New activities, maybe you
Yeah.
bungee jumped or something, you hadn't done that before.
So, but what you're doing there is, and automatically you bring people into a positive headspace. You're thinking of what did you really enjoy, what's really exciting, or what are you looking forward to, what's going to be kind of maybe different and interesting about it. So when we talk about yellow hat, we're talking about forward-looking, being progressive, practical, all of those types of things. Now, if we look at green hat, and for me, this is probably one that I really enjoy doing green hat thinking. Green hat is the what if hat. Possibilities. Imagine if. What might be possible in that. So think about new growth. So things that are just starting, emerging, something that could potentially be the case. So if we were talking about green hat thinking and holidays, what kinds of things might we think about?
New cities, new country that maybe you haven't been before.
So So new cities, new activities, maybe new people, opportunities.
Just, culture and historical visits, that maybe you've read about them, or
Yeah.
maybe you've watched a YouTube clip, but now suddenly you're going there, like the Colosseum or something. That could be super.
And that's where you can really start to explore.
Yeah.
Now, would you put that in
Yellow or
yellow
green.
hat, or would you put that in green hat? So yellow being something that you're really excited about and something that's positive, while green hat is something that's new. Well, it could go on both.
It could be in both. It would
But
be.
you're exploring it in a slightly different way
Yeah.
in both. And again, if we were to talk about, let's say we were to have a conversation about a young person maybe joining secondary school for the first time, or being part of an AS support class for the first time, and they were maybe moving from mainstream into that AS class or into the AS class, where they're going to have more integration in mainstream. This is a really lovely way of exploring that kind of a conversation. What are the black hat? What's the things that you're maybe a little bit more worried about? What are you more anxious about? Red hat, and this can be the most difficult one to do, are feelings. And you cannot justify the feeling when you're naming it. So you're just naming the emotion but not explaining the emotion. So when you think about holidays, what feelings or emotions does that invoke in us?
Excitement.
Okay. Yeah.
Happiness.
Yeah.
Nervous.
Yeah.
Anxiousness. Yeah. Same as nervous.
Excited, we have happy, enthusiastic,
Sad.
Well,
Yeah.
some people go on their holidays and day one they're thinking about when they have to come home.
Stressed.
Stressed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Homesick.
And what can be really helpful, especially if you're working with somebody who maybe finds the language of emotions a bit more challenging, is to actually have a bank of words. And sometimes I might have words on sheets or on cards, and you pick the words. Oh yeah, I would actually feel that, and I would actually feel that, and yeah, I would actually feel that. And they don't all have to be positive. The assumption that feelings are only positive, when actually within an average family, you could be going on a family trip and have all of those emotions going on, where some of the family are extraordinarily excited and really looking forward to the trip, and another member of the family is utterly terrified at the thoughts of having to get on the airplane, or having to go on that trip, or what's the hotel going to be like, or what will I do if, and all of that anxiety and that sense of being overwhelmed, and having to navigate all of that can be kind of really, really very challenging. So we have white hat, black hat, yellow hat, green hat, and red hat. And then the last one is the blue hat. And that's the organised. Actually organising what I've just done there, I was wearing blue hat throughout all of that. Deciding the order of what we were going to do. And what we've done there now is we were all thinking in the same direction to explore a topic. I wouldn't necessarily go through all of them all the time, but it's a really interesting way to stretch a topic out and allow people to add, oh yeah, can I just put that on black hat? So you might then go back and think a little bit more. So now what we're going to do is we're going to think about that for a moment. Now, I just presented that as a really simple table, and because I'm a visual learner, I'm going to present it slightly differently this time. And Hannah and Anne are going to help me. So, this time I'm going to do our thinking hats. using a fishbone diagram. And fishbone diagrams are just a really simple little diagram using a way of breaking the information down, and we're going to take it into 5 areas. So, white hat, we're going to take red hat, we're going to take black, we're going to take yellow, and we're going to take green. Now, and there's loads of ways of exploring this for different types of learners. You can use images if you want. You can use, but this is a graphic organizer, not a mind map. So all we're doing is organizing the information in a very simple way. If we can keep adding value to it as well. So we're going to do the fishbone, and we're going to do it thinking about joining and going back to school. So thinking about the idea now, thinking about it from maybe a primary school perspective, and maybe going back into a class or changing teachers, from a secondary school going from primary to secondary, so that transition piece, changing schools, new class, new people, but also students going back from first into second, second into third, up into fifth or whatever. So what we're going to do is we're going to share the exploration of it a little bit. So Hannah, can I ask you to come up, and can you start with the white hat, and you can either, we'll help you, and then we'll kind of take turns. So,
Okay. So I suppose the fact would be your subjects, what new subjects you might be doing, whether you're moving from primary to secondary, you might be doing a lot of subjects you've not done before, or if you're moving to a new school or you're moving between the years, you might be taking subjects, you might have switched, you might be taking new subjects. Your timetable, what that's going to look like. I might get a different pen there. There's one here. Timetable. Let me think. New teachers. Who your teachers are.
The layout of the building.
Yes. Getting to school, maybe transport. Maybe the
school, the building itself, maybe.
Yeah, the building.
Bathrooms.
Yes, it's a big one. Anything else?
Just maybe the support structure, so year heads and
Yes.
you know how the organisational system of teachers and adults.
Lunch times
Yeah.
as well. What you have and when you have them and where.
Lockers.
Lockers.
School bag.
Books and equipment.
Yes.
Yeah. Exams.
I'm running out of space here. Exams.
Friends. Other people, the actual friends that you're maybe who are there or who are moving. The rules. Okay. Now, another thing you can think about at this point is, when you have the blue hat on now, Hannah, right? So, which hat do you think we should do next? So we're quite neutral in our thinking at the moment. We're just naming things off, we're just putting in the facts. So, where do you think might be a nice place to go next?
I think you could either go maybe to yellow if you wanted to, if you were trying to kind of not necessarily keep it positive, but if you wanted to start off on a positive maybe. Or I think you could go to red either, because I'm having a lot of feelings as I'm writing these.
Yeah.
I'm having a lot of feelings, so that feels like quite a natural progression to say how I feel about each of these things.
Yeah. So why don't we go on to red hat then?
Perfect. I'll use a different marker, I'll use a red marker. Okay.
And again, coloured pens are another really great way of doing it. And colouring it out. Worried.
Excited.
word.
And just, if I can pause for 1 second there, like that's a really interesting moment now to explore the difference between scared and worried. Because there's so much nuance between feelings,
Yeah.
and that we never have feelings by themselves. They always come in a cocktail. So we always have dominant and passive feelings that happen simultaneously. So we can be both, for example, go back to Anne's bungee jump, that I would never do. But you don't have a singular feeling doing that. There are people who are doing it, it's a combination of excitement and utter panic. And it's the balance between those two that really builds the capacity of it. So actually exploring and the difference between those words, feeling maybe down or sad,
Yeah.
and the understanding that actually you could be having 5 or 6 different feelings.
Yeah.
And then you can explore that a little bit further by maybe doing a pie chart and breaking up how much of that feeling do you feel. You can, like we spoke about yesterday, you can scale on a scale of 1 to 10, how worried are you? So you can really start to explore the feeling side a little bit more. Sorry for...
Anxious, I suppose.
Anxious,
Yeah.
yeah. Curious.
Overwhelmed.
I find a lot of first years coming into school, one of their dominant feelings is hopeful. They feel really excited and hopeful about new friendships, about a fresh start. That can be a really exciting part of it.
Optimistic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
optimistic.
I think they can also feel very motivated.
Happy.
I think one of the emotions that I emphasise a lot with our first years coming in is that they're brave. That they're kind of feeling very brave, or that they access their kind of bravery skills. That, you know, that they're, you know, it's a new environment and it's something new and it's something exciting. Where would you like to go next, Hannah?
I think I would go to the yellow. I think going to the positive and then looking at the black hat thinking as a natural progression after that, I think.
The only thing I would tend to find is the longer you leave the black hat,
Okay,
the more you're ending with the negative.
that's true.
So you have to kind of think about,
Yeah.
I tend to go black hat
So you could go black now
and then go
Yeah.
yellow and green.
Yeah.
So you're balancing out maybe
Yes.
a little bit, and sometimes it's after doing the feelings one, you're connecting that sense of worry with that.
Yeah.
Are you happy to continue there, Hannah?
I don't mind.
I know you're
Are you
okay,
sure?
you're fine, yeah.
Black hat thinking.
Certainly I would, from a first year perspective, students going back to school bullying, there tends to be a big worry about,
Yeah.
will I be safe, will I be picked on, what do I do, what do I say, how do I manage that, and that bullying and feeling safe. Now, feeling safe, is that a feeling word? So should I put feeling in the red hat?
I think it could go in both.
Okay,
Yeah. And I think a step down from bullying and safety is just like loneliness and isolation. Will I
Yeah.
have friends? Will I
Friends,
have people to talk
Okay.
to? Will I be by myself?
And
then
I
will
would be saying
target
there, loneliness is definitely a feeling.
feeling, yeah.
Whereas isolation is, black hat, but loneliness is definitely a feeling. And so as you're doing this process with a student and you're expanding the idea, you might go, well, where does that belong now? Does that fit into the feelings place, or should we? And again, we want to try and say, well, we might come back to that, or we'll just take a quick note of that and come back. Getting lost.
I think getting in trouble.
Yeah. I think who will be in my class, the other people, I think are a big part of.
I think a huge thing coming from primary into secondary school is suddenly having to manage 9 different adults in a day.
Yeah.
When for 8 years you've had one go-to person all the time.
Yeah.
And the movement as well.
And that kind of thing of knowing who to go to for what, you know, because in primary school, if you want to join something, if there's something happening, you want to know more about it, you want to join it, you speak to your own teacher, and that teacher that's generally the way it works. That teacher will put you forward. Whereas in secondary school, you might, if you want to join the hockey team, you have to go and maybe speak to a teacher, an adult that you don't know, that you've never spoken to before, and you have to find their room, and then you have to know when is an appropriate time to go and speak to them. There's a lot involved in that.
And I think to kind of add to what you were just saying there, Hannah, black hat for a lot of young people, organisational skills.
Yes.
You know, managing my textbooks, my copies, my materials, who needs what. One teacher wants a hardback copy, another teacher wants a softback copy. One needs one with lines, one needs one with graph
But
paper.
even moving from class to class, they haven't done that before because they're generally in the one class in primary, so that's a big issue for them as well, getting lost.
So then, anything else then before we move on? Yellow hat then. What's really exciting and possible and things they're looking forward to? For me, you know, certainly for a lot of young people, support. You know, providing a variety of support.
New subjects, new teachers.
I think there's, you know, quite a lot of opportunities, just new opportunities in secondary school, you know, opportunity to play different sports, join lots of different teams, different clubs. If there's things that you were really interested in that just weren't on offer in your primary school. Freedom, I think, as well.
And I think I'd add independence to that.
Yeah.
A little bit more independence. You know, you're moving up that independent scale when you're moving to second level.
Yeah. Maybe you're suddenly getting yourself to school. Whether you're walking by yourself or you're getting the bus by yourself when you've always been dropped or have always walked with a parent up to that point. And that could be a worry as well.
And that's just as you say that was what was coming into my mind, because I was thinking, certainly for students who are moving into first year, they're going from being the oldest and most mature students on campus to being unbelievably the youngest and the smallest
That is
students
such
on
a
campus.
huge thing for them, because I remember when I was teaching, and you know, I taught an all-girls school, and the girls that were 12, even as a teacher, just because of the nature of the school, you kind of treat them a little bit like adults. They start to behave like adults. They're the leaders of that school, and then suddenly within 3 months their confidence is just back down to the floor, and they're suddenly the junior infants that they were minding 3 months ago. It's a bit of a head wreck for them.
And I think that, you know, even when you explore an idea like that, then you can say, well, do we need to put anything back into our white hat about that? Do we need to put anything into our red hat about that? Do you want to add anything to that? So again, you're stepping them through the cognitive process, and it goes back into that idea. And actually, one of the things that some of the research will tell us with young autistic adults and teenagers is the categorization of data. Even those lines can help, because what they do is they allow me to box off and to organize my thinking, and it feels more structured. And that more structured nature makes it easier for me to navigate that journey. And my feelings, like even myself as I look at that, I love a box. I love lines, I love that structure, because it allows me to compartmentalize the information that's in front of me, and I feel things are not getting lost in the mix in there somewhere. So anything else that we would say is yellow or positive?
Friends, I suppose, new friends.
I mean, we have to add in home economics. I'm a home economics teacher. You know, the best new subject that a student might do. Slight bias. Languages, all of the new practical subjects.
Practical subjects.
You know, I think can be really exciting for them, because they're suddenly spending maybe a larger proportion of their time doing more kinesthetic.
Yeah.
And in no way saying they're not doing that in primary, but I think that allowing to specialise a little bit more.
I remember being very, very excited to be in a science lab for the
Yeah.
first time and to
Yeah.
have the classes in the lab
Yeah.
with all the equipment. Anything else?
I think I go back to maybe the point I made earlier on. I think the fresh start
Yeah.
is a really exciting part and a very optimistic part of starting a new school, but also starting a new class.
Yeah.
So it can be even if I'm changing teachers in primary, all of that can have a really kind of exciting
There's
part.
that
of it.
grown-up part to
Yeah.
it there, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Particularly with their you know, if they just turn 13 or whatever, you know,
Yeah.
it's kind of that stepping stone
Yeah.
for them.
And even uniform, that can be an exciting part. And I think for some students, uniform can be a yellow, but I think in a very specific way, for autistic young people,
It can be
the uniform can be a black,
Definitely.
because the fabrics in the uniform,
Oh, yeah.
the constricted nature of the uniform, the footwear, all of those things.
And all of that the things that brings as well. So, I don't like the fabric, I find it really uncomfortable, I can't concentrate when I'm in it, but I have to wear it, otherwise I'm going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
And what do I do if I have a day where I just can't wear it?
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
going to happen?
Yeah, and I think if you take that example there, Hannah, it's a really interesting one where you can use your thinking hats to explore a case study. So let's say we take the case study of I'm wearing the uniform, I feel I'm comfortable in that uniform, it's a very hot day, I'm not allowed to take my jumper off. Now, what do I feel? What are the negatives or the black hats of that? So you can use this as a tool to explore an individual case study
Yeah.
and a very specific moment in time. And it's also a really good way of building a social story. So that you're using your different hats to build your social story. So what would you do, who would you go to, what would you say, and you kind of build a social story from there. So then green hat. So green hat is the possibles, the potentials, extracurricular, I would put down there.
Yeah.
I see in my particular school, because many students who join us are coming from a uniform school and we're a non-uniform school, and being able to wear whatever they want and dye their hair whatever colour they want and having that absolute freedom, there's a real expression that happens that can be a really interesting part of that early adolescent process of kind of finding their tribe, and I think that's a really exciting part of maybe their expression or how they express themselves.
I think that idea of finding who they are as well,
Yes.
who will I become over the next 6 years.
Yeah.
And
As a
finding
friend.
/ exploring themselves.
Yeah.
You were going to say something else?
Friends as well. Because often they come in with their set from primary school, but yet by around January, February, you can find that they've suddenly, like you said, finding their tribe or finding the friends maybe that they have more in common with, So I think that's always important for them transitioning, that possibility is there, because sometimes, they have their best friends forever and they've all this, and then suddenly, that they're finding their own group, another group,
So again, it's a really interesting way. Now, from your perspective, Hannah, as a tool, how did you find that now?
Yeah, I like it, and similar to what you said, Billy, I think things don't get so lost, when you're, if you're thinking about transitioning to secondary school. If you're a 12-year-old thinking about, I'm transitioning to secondary school now in 2 months, that's a lot of things all at once to have in your head, and things might get missed, and maybe you're focusing a lot here and you're forgetting all of the other things. You're forgetting the facts and you're forgetting the positives and you're forgetting the new opportunities because you're being pulled kind of in this direction,
Yeah.
whereas when you can see it, it kind of gives you a bit more perspective, because you can see, well, that the black thinking is there and
Yeah.
validated, absolutely, but it's actually only one part,
Yeah.
Yeah,
you know, of a bigger picture.
yeah, yeah.
And if you wanted to explore that further now, you might say, well, let's go back to the white hat for a moment and let's think about lockers. Is there anything you would add to the yellow hat or the green hat or the black hat or the red hat based on lockers? So you can take the facts and blow them up by saying, well, actually, oh yeah, I might be, what locker will I have? Who will I be beside? Is that locker going to be a top or a middle locker? Like, for example, in the school I was previously in, our students had combination locks. I can't work a combination lock. So they would come to me, look, I'm going, I can't help you, I can't open that lock. That twisting forward, backwards and finding numbers and learning the 3 digits, and that could be really, really challenging for students. So it's all of these small things that you can really expand the topic out and develop the topic further. You can do it on a board like that, you can do it on a worksheet, you can do it as a movement activity. There's loads of ways. I really like the fact that we use the coloured pens there, Hannah. I think that really, really helped. And again, it makes it jump out a little bit more in a
Or you
little
could,
bit more
use
focused
coloured
way.
paper, even if you were going to put it on the wall, maybe, do you know, that kind of way, and then it would be very visual there again, you know?
Yeah. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take that, you can take a seat there, Hannah. We're going to take that a little bit further now. We're turning it into kind of 2 extension activities. And really what we want to do is, we want you to use the opportunity of having explored something in a more detailed way to potentially do 2 different pieces of work. And one would be writing a letter to your teacher, if you maybe you're going back to primary, writing a letter to maybe your new year head or your tutor, if you're joining secondary, or if you're moving a year in secondary, where you would advise them or guide them around how you feel and what your concerns and your excitement is around going back to school. So if I was writing an advice sheet and I was saying, well, these are the things that will work really, really well for me going back to school, I might use some of this information. Now, I've also done this Thinking Hats piece of work about learning in class. Thinking about how you like to learn in class. What are the facts? Homework, the amount of books, the space on the desk, writing stuff down from the board, note-taking, note-making, memorization, spelling. What are my feelings around that? What are the black hat? What is the... So you can actually explore learning in much more detail. We could do that for English, for Irish, for maths, for home economics. Now in fairness, home economics, it would be just all yellow, because there would be nothing in the black. But it's thinking about all of the different ways that we explore or blow up or expand the topic. So the 2 activities that we're suggesting that you might explore as part of their summer challenge programme is, one would be writing a letter to their school to guide or advise them. A lovely activity if they're doing their summer challenge as part of a transition programme into 2nd level, is to write a letter back to their primary school teacher about what worked or what they liked or what they're going to miss about primary. It can be a really, really lovely way of rounding off the end of their primary school experience, and a lovely gift maybe for their primary school teacher. They might add it with maybe a small bunting, or they might do a small piece of weaving or a bit of cross stitch or something as part of that process as well. It can be a lovely way of gifting their experience back to their primary school. It can be a lovely way of exploring that. The other thing that they could also do is to really look at the idea of exploring it a little bit more if you were advising a student. So if you're in 2nd or 3rd year in 2nd level, what advice would you give to a 1st year student joining the school? And doing up maybe a 1-pager, it could be bullet points, it could be a fishbone diagram, it could be a little essay, it could be an advice sheet.
A video.
It could be a video, which is a lovely way of doing it, or an audio clip, where they're producing something to say, if you're joining our school, here's some examples of things that you might keep an eye on or you might work on. So it's an interesting way of using a simple tool based on parallel thinking in Edward de Bono's work to expand the topic. So you're blowing the topic up first to then bring it back into a more targeted piece of work, but making sure that you differentiate that piece of work based on the age and stage of the child, based on their interest, their ability, their natural talents, so like technology, visuals, all of those types of things. Is there anything, Hannah or Anne, you'd like to add to that as an activity?
I think just another way of doing it, you know, especially I think if you were doing it with a group, would be, you know, if you were in a room like this and you could even print out pictures of a green hat, put it on one wall, a red hat on this wall, a black hat on this wall, a white hat on this wall, and then the group that you're working with going around with post-it notes, and then you have a massive canvas that's covered with, you know, if you wanted to make it
More physical.
more physical for them,
Yeah.
And anything else?
No, I just think it's great. Because for me, I'm thinking, I think I'd have hats. I'd actually have the coloured paper and actually have a template for the hat, and actually get that, and then like that, put them on the wall. You know, that kind of way. So,
And kids love that. I always said they loved that in the classroom when they, you know, it was, you know, you'd taken it off the paper and you put it on the wall instead.
And it's more visual as well. You see, you know, that, you know, it's a bit like what we've done here. They then can see all the other stuff that they have the green hat that other students have written down. You know what I mean?
But it's also a really simple way of doing it is to do one of the simple buntings and have the different hats on the bunting. And then you give them good space, make a big bunting, give them good space between them. And then, or you encourage the students to wear blue hat. So they're deciding the order of the hats. They're deciding how much time will we need. We're going to do 15 minutes on this. How much time will we give each hat? Well, this is a more difficult topic, so we might give 4 minutes to black hat, we might give 2 minutes to red hat. So allowing them, again, we want to build their executive functioning skills. Their executive functioning skills are their ability to organise, manage, priorities, set tasks, set goals, all of those things, again, to build their capacity with this skill. So again, do a little bit of Googling of Edward Bonner thinking hats. If you do Google images, you'll find loads of different images of the hats, which you can then print out and stick. What can be very helpful is printing them on sticky labels, and then you can use those sticky labels around the room as well. So we hope that was helpful and that you enjoy it, and we're going to go on now and do a little bit more work around the idea of creating a tourist experience, exploring your area a little bit more, connecting it back to the idea of our nature trip. Thank you.